Welcome to the Not in the Job Description podcast. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
And I'm Chris Kiernan.
No matter what type of job you've had, there were situations that happened to you during work that you couldn't wait to tell your friends about.
We interview a variety of guests about some of their crazy stories from work, from entry-level food service industry jobs to doctors and attorneys. We will explore funny, gross, embarrassing, scary, and sometimes almost unbelievable stories that people have experienced while on the job.
Keep in mind that our guests or the companies they work for may be masked in order to protect the innocent, or maybe even the guilty. On today's show, we're talking with Brian, who is a home inspector. Hey, Brian.
Hey there.
How's it going, Brian?
Going well.
So thanks for joining us today. I myself have only purchased 2 homes in my life, and I'm sure that we had to have them inspected because most places are not going to give you a loan for it. And luckily, the houses I bought were not that old, and we really didn't have any issues. Did you ever have any issues on your houses, Chris?
No, not really. I mean, my first house was pretty old, but the people that had owned it prior took pretty good care of it, so it wasn't so bad.
So, and just to make sure I'm not even getting us off on the wrong track here, when you do home inspections, tell us a little bit more about what it is you do.
So great question. And I think it's already evident that it is slightly different. So it's not necessarily inspections tied to new home purchases. They are tied to insurance. So the inspections I do are insurance loss control inspections. And so how that works is when a homeowner gets a new policy or renews their policy, they put an order in with us and we go out and we review the property. We do a loop around the outside and we're looking for building materials. And is there any trees hanging over the house? How big is the trunk that's leaning on the house? That type of deal. We're also doing some things around hazards, right? Does the customer have a pool in their backyard without a fence? Is there 3 pit bulls and 2 tigers in the backyard, right? That type of thing we're going to try and catch because it's going to mitigate the risk for the insurance company in the long run.
Well, that absolutely makes sense. But I imagine you check a lot of the similar things that a regular home inspector would do for mortgage purposes, don't you?
Yes, very much so. There's different types of inspections depending on the value of the home, the value of the policy that they're taking out. Some of our inspections, we actually go inside the house and we're looking at the mechanicals, HVAC, hot water heater, electrical panel, that type of deal. And what we're looking for is specific call outs. Is your electrical panel outdated and a risk for a home fire? Is your piping outdated and risk for the homeowner there? And then we also can do some things with the roofing and shingles and things along those lines. So it depends on the type of policy. But yes, we do the full gambit of inspection.
So I have to ask you, though, I know you from a different world. How did you get, and by the way, you wouldn't have me inspect a house because it would be an entire waste of time. I don't know anything about what it should look like. If somebody nailed 2 pieces of wood together, that'd be fine with me. How did you get this background? Like what makes you a home inspector? How do you end up getting this kind of expertise that people are going to hire you to do it for them?
Yeah, it's a long story and I'm going to make it short for us. So I've always had a passion in real estate. I enjoyed not necessarily the buying and selling, but more just the construction piece and getting my hands dirty. I've done a lot of work on rehabs and flipped my own house and things like that. And so right before the birth of my first child, my wife and I had a conversation and we said, hey, what's childcare costs look like and what's some of these other expenses that we need to take into account, and decided that, we could save some money by her staying at home, but we would also lose some in the long run. So we needed to make up that income, and just did some basic research and found a couple opportunities that were very similar to this through trial and error, and then did some additional training with those companies to kind of get up to speed. And at this point, I've been doing this for almost 9 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's not very much from a house or an inspection standpoint that I haven't seen. And so that experience is what I lean on now. And I do have a couple employees, and so I can kind of give some of that experience to them as well and get them up and running. The majority of my inspections now are very specific. We're looking inside, mechanicals, roofing, that type of stuff. So it's a great opportunity and something that honestly I encourage to a lot of people. You have flexibility. You can own your own business. You work with customers on a day in and day out basis, and you are helping them and also helping the company. So it's a fun job, but it keeps me out and keeps me moving.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I was looking at that, as far as, okay, how much does it cost for us to have daycare and everything? I'd have probably just opened up a daycare. So good for you, because I don't have the skills to be doing that.
I don't have the patience for the kids.
So you say you kind of go in and there's nothing that you haven't seen. Tell us about a time that you've walked in maybe to do just what you thought was a routine inspection and just saw some of the most jacked up mechanical home repair type of work that you can imagine. I'm sure you've seen all kinds of craziness.
Yes. Are you all familiar with a wood burning stove?
Oh yeah.
So we do wood burning stove inspections, which, as you can imagine, the individuals that have a wood burning stove in their home fall into two buckets. They either love it and they use it as supplemental heat, or they've never touched it and it came with the house.
Right.
I've walked into homes before for a wood burning stove, and the piping that goes from the stove to the exterior of the home has 2 to 3 inches of space between the walls and the pipe, so you can literally see outside.
Oh, wow.
And I asked the customer at the time, like, that seems like it's a problem. And bless her heart, she said, yes, but the stove works so well, we don't notice it.
Huh.
And
okay.
so, it was a few follow-up questions. Did you install the stove yourself? Do you have it inspected? Come to find out that she had lived in the home, I think, since the 60s. And her husband installed it, but a few years back, there was some issues, so they had to have work done, and they just never called anybody to fix the space. So fortunate for her, we were there, we took pictures, we inspected it, measured it, all that kind of good stuff, and kind of walked her through, hey, you need to report this because there's some opportunity for risk or safety, right? Things can get in, animals, people, that type of stuff. So yes, we have seen some wild things walking into homes.
Yeah, at least that's one that seems like it's relatively easy to fix, right?
Yes. Very much so. And it should be a quick fix. I've seen, some others from an exterior standpoint where you look at a ranch and the front half of the house, the shingles are one color. You go to the back half and the shingles are a different color. And when you talk to the customer, they give you the full story about how they didn't want to pay for the full replacement.
Right. Nice.
So they just did the one and they couldn't match it. So they have a red and a green. And it's a very Christmassy house.
Yeah. Now, is that a problem from an insurance perspective?
Not at all. The replacement materials that they used were identical. The only difference is color. And so to your question, the customer was concerned about that. And as we walked them through it, we were able to show them that, that everything is the same. The warranties and all of that is consistent. So no concerns on our end.
Just bad fashion.
That's exactly right.
You're just the safety police, not the fashion police.
That is exactly right.
So you gave us some examples of, some easy stuff. Have you seen anything where you're like, oh my God, why don't they just burn this place down and start over?
Yes. So some of the inspections we do are for active rehabs. And so we will actually go in at different stages of the rehab and do those inspections. And I've done some here in the Columbus metro area where you walk in and the only walls are the exterior ones. The only floors are the basement. And you are taking a ladder as you walk in the front door to the basement. And so it's at those points that you look at the investor or the homeowner and you say, what if we just totaled it out, right? Yeah. But I've also seen them on the flip side, which makes it a cool job. You can see it when they're down at their bare studs, and then you visit it, 6 months later, and it's a brand new looking house with new mechanicals and new finishes, and it's an enjoyable process for me.
Well, that would be kind of cool. Just seeing, I like to see things built. That would be awesome. But the one thing I always think about anytime somebody's going out and about and they're visiting people, first off, is this something that the homeowner is always the person who is kind of the catalyst for having you come out? Or are there situations where the insurance company says, hey, we need you to go, and not necessarily driven by the homeowner?
100% driven by the insurance company, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is a fun fact of the business. As I mentioned, there's different types of inspections. The most basic is an exterior, and we don't even announce that we're coming. So we show up at the door, knock on the door, advise to the customer what we're there to do, that we were sent by their homeowner's insurance. There's a handful of questions Are there deadbolt locks on all your doors? Are there working fire extinguishers? That type of deal. And so those pose probably the most risk for the inspector themselves, and it's not something that is super enjoyable to surprise a homeowner. But I think through the years, we have developed some strategies to disarm them.
Now, well, we had a guy on once, Rocky, and he was an interesting character, but he was a process server. So he's another person that shows up, not necessarily by the person wanting them to be there. And he told us about some scenarios that were, talk about dangerous. Like he was actually shot at. Have you had any customers kind of go off on you, or where you felt like maybe this isn't safe?
Yes. No one has shot at me. Knock on wood.
Oh, that's good. Well, the night's young, but go on.
Yeah, there's plenty of time. No one has shot at me. I've gone to a property, knocked on the door to let them know what I was doing. No one came to the door, so I went ahead and went about my business. And a little forewarn here, when these customers sign up for their insurance policies or their renewals, they are advising that someone is able to come visit. So it's in their policy.
Yeah, it's probably on page 837, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, and the font size is about 2.
Okay.
So it's missed often. But yeah, so I visited a property and knocked on the door. No one came, so I started to make my way around the house to do the measurements and photos. I go to the backyard, and a gentleman and his son, probably 100 yards away, and they're back there working on something in the yard, and they see me, and the gentleman comes towards me, pulls out a gun, points it at me, and says, "What are you doing on my property?"
Oh, wow. Well, when you said you weren't shot at, I thought, oh, there was nothing there, but that's pretty close, man.
Yeah. And again, I mentioned we've developed some strategies. And so one of those first things I do is I am quick to advise, I'm here on behalf of your homeowner's insurance, which is X. And then if they still resist and they're still troubled by it, I can advise them, listen, I'll take this back. I'll reach out to your agent. We'll get some time scheduled that works better for you. Right. And that happens from time to time, and that's understandable. But this individual, he was adamant, did not want to talk to me, told me to get off the property. And the best part, which I think is hilarious, he said, "Don't you know showing up on people's properties will get you shot?"
You did now.
Yes, and I do now. So that story has another step. I went back, sent it back to the agent. The agent came back to me a few days later, said, I've spoken with him. He's comfortable. Go on out again, and it'll be fine. Visit the property a couple days later, and he doesn't come to the door. I walk out back, and wouldn't you know it, he's sitting out back with his no one out there, but he was working on something, and he sees me, gets up, and again, the same scenario. He pulls out his gun. This time his pants are undone, and as he's walking towards me, he's trying to hold his pants up and point the gun at me. And at that point, I said, "This is not worth the money."
Yeah.
And so I told the gentleman I'd be sending it back. I reached out to the agent. And last I heard, the policy was canceled for that gentleman.
Yeah, probably best idea.
Yeah, the agent advised that it was a risk in case someone visited the property and something could happen. So they exited that relationship.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, I can only imagine you're going to see more of this. You're going to see more people with issues, especially if they're not the one who called you to come out and inspect. So that's not too surprising. In doing a little bit of research on just home inspections in general, there's a little bit of a theme. So I want to ask you first, like, favorite part of the job, worst part of the job. What would you say? I mean, of doing the job, not just of having it.
Yeah. So the favorite part of the job, you won't believe me, but it's actually being out in the field. I like being outside. I like meeting people and interacting with the community. You would be surprised how many people stop me while I'm inspecting to ask questions, right? Is this a concern? Should I fix this? My window's falling out of my house. What do you think? The worst part of the job for me is sitting down and inputting it all. So there is computer programs and things like that we do. We also sketch out the property. And so we measure while we're at the property, but the actual, administrative work of inputting and sending it off is tedious, but needed. So that would be the best and the worst.
So then would you say technology has probably changed a lot since you started this, right? So do you ever just do like maybe a Google Earth kind of view of the home before you even get there, just to kind of get a feel for what you might encounter, or do you just show up sight unseen? Or
yeah, technology has changed dramatically to the point now where I can actually use apps on my phone to take pictures and upload them directly to our clients. I don't do a whole lot of checking before I go. If I can't locate the address, I will. I do run into that quite a bit, but not in that sense. One of the biggest technology advances for me personally is, as you can imagine, I'm doing 20 houses at a time, right? So I have to make driving lists and I have to make sure that they're efficient, organized. And it used to be that we would, don't laugh at me, we would use MapQuest. Mm-hmm. And we would plan out our routes in the morning. And so if you would imagine, right, we're up at 7 trying to get a route planned out. But we have since found technology that we can upload all of our houses at once, and it'll spit out the most efficient route. And the best part is it's on my phone, so I'm not manually typing in addresses in the GPS.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. I mean, even thinking about how did we drive anywhere 30 years ago? I have no idea. But there were times when I was younger, I remember we had maps. My wife and I would drive somewhere, and you'd have a freaking map across the front of the car. It's just unfathomable. I bet your kids wouldn't even know how to unfold a map these days.
Right. And they definitely couldn't fold it back together.
Well, I don't know that I could either, but I get where you're coming from. Right. I sound like old man Scott here complaining about maps. Well, the other thing that I found in just some of the research I did, and I'm kind of curious, I'm going to walk you through a few stories one by one and see if you had something similar. This comes from Realtor.com under the title of Strange But True Home Inspection Stories. The first one was Dead Animals in the Attic or Crawl Space. You ever come across that one?
Oh, man. I am sure I have.
Wait a minute. You telling me that you may have come across that and it didn't even stand out? Because I'd be having nightmares.
Yeah, the one that stands out to me is not in the crawl space or the attic. I did a property probably about 6 months ago, and it was a rural property. It was a farm. And when I went out into the backyard, they had just processed some of their chickens. And so they actually had those laying out. So that's the one that sticks out. But yes, I am sure, even if I hadn't seen them, I am sure I have smelled them in some of the properties I've been at.
That almost seems like it would be common. I feel like if you went to 20 houses, one of them's going to have a dead animal.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Any dead bodies?
Almost his own.
Yeah, almost no dead bodies. I've seen some criminal activity, that's for sure, but no dead bodies. I've shared before with Scott. I have gone to a property in a not so great neighborhood, and you look around at all the properties and all the houses are boarded up, but there's tons of people walking around. And it's like, where do you live? I parked, got out to do my inspection. The home was vacant. It was a rehab. And as I'm walking back to the car, a gentleman walks up to me in normal attire, looks at me, pulls out a badge from under his shirt and looks me square in the eye and says, "Sir, what are you doing here?" And I said, "An inspection." And he looked right back at me and says, "You're in the wrong neighborhood." And so I said, "Not a problem." I got out and I looked it up later, and they were doing a drug bust at 3 houses down from where it was at. So yes, I've seen the criminal activity. No dead bodies. Again, knock on wood, the night is young. I would rather not see those if possible.
Yeah, no kidding. I'd be a little worried. I've been watching that Jeffrey Dahmer story. If I get any smell at all, I'd be gone. I'd be gone.
Yeah, his neighbor was spot on, wasn't she? She didn't want him to do it.
Yeah. Oh, man. They should have called a home inspector much earlier. So the other thing, well, part of the dead animals in the attic of this story was also bees' nests or wasp nests. And I can tell you this, I'm the biggest wuss in the world when it comes to any animal in my house. Before we did my basement and had it all finished, there was a dead mouse that fell on my weight bench, and I was ready to commit arson. Like I did not want to be in this house. It was so gross to me. And when we started to do the remodeling, my brother-in-law is really good with this stuff. And he's taking down part of the stuff on the ceiling, like the flame retardant stuff. And he looks up and he shoves the flame retardant stuff back up real quick. And he goes, "We might have some trouble here." So what do you mean? Go get a garbage bag. So I go and get a great big garbage bag. He pulls back that flame retardant stuff. And I'm not kidding you. Between the two floor joists, there's about 3.5 feet worth of wasp nest. And it covers the entire space. I mean, this thing barely fit in a garbage bag. It was that big, but thank God there was nothing active or live in it. But that's the kind of stuff where if I was an inspector, I'd be like, I'm not going near that. So I take it you haven't seen any of the bees or wasp nests either.
I've seen some. Yeah, you find ways to avoid them. It's one of those where my camera has a camera pole, so I can stick the pole out further and not stand next to something if there's something out there. But yes,
Smart.
That would be a fear, getting stung while you're walking around.
Another one of the Realtor.com strange but true home inspection stories. Somebody had a boat trailer being used as a home foundation. You see anything where you look at it and say, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. This isn't even livable. Have you found one of those?
I have. Not a boat trailer. I went to a property where the property was moved. I don't know if you've ever seen that, where they literally pick a house up and move it. And so when I got to the house, it was sitting on cinder blocks, and they were living in the house.
Oh, wow.
And I had some concerns, as you would imagine, and they didn't have electric hooked up yet, the water, anything else, but they were in there. And the gentleman could not understand why I would think that would be risky. Right. They had cinder blocks on all four corners and a couple, in the middle for support. But I told him, hey, we need to do something different quickly.
Yeah. And until we do, no roughhousing. My God.
Yeah. No running back and forth. That's for sure.
Another one they said, which I thought this was interesting, another strange but true story. You wouldn't believe the things they said duct tape is used to fix. I mean, I'm talking about plumbing, electric, anything like on the roof. If there's been a leak, just throw some duct tape up there. This whole article talked about the weird things they found where people had tried to just fix things themselves and couldn't believe the house didn't burn down or get destroyed.
Yeah, I laugh because duct tape is one of those that you see everywhere. I don't know if it's just cultural, where if it's broke, the first default is let's duct tape it.
Yeah,
but it's true. I've seen hot water heaters that had a crack in them that they use duct tape to seal the crack.
Is that a problem?
Yes. I have seen, this is the great one that, again, doesn't have any structural difference. They were using duct tape to hold the transition strips down. So they would fold them over so they're sticky on both sides. So you wouldn't technically see it. When you would walk across the floors weren't level. So the transition strip would move.
Those pesky screws or nails aren't in the way, though.
I told the homeowner, I said, I admire your ingenuity, but the screws to hold that down are like 75 cents. So I'm not sure if they went back and did it. But yeah, we definitely see duct tape everywhere.
I consider that a good thing, but maybe not for the insurance company. Another one they have here is just some electrical system issues. There was a picture of this on the website, and if you get a chance to look at it, I highly recommend it. There's this beautiful pool, and draped across the pool are multiple strands of Christmas lights.
It's the fear of something, and I see those everywhere. I think there was a trend 10 years, 15 years ago where everybody says, hey, we're going to put Christmas lights out back. And I can't tell you how many times I've been to a property, and to your point, it's a pool, and for whatever reason, those lights have fallen off. They're still plugged in, and they're laying in the pool. And it's like, we could just take those down. It's July, and people don't, but they enjoy it. It's aesthetically appealing, I guess. But yeah, don't do that. Get the ones that are made, and make sure that they are really harnessed well on the walls.
I got to imagine there's been some other electrical things, right? Like, because that seems to be one of those things that people think, oh, I can just kind of rig it up myself. And then if a real licensed inspector or an electrician were to see it, they'd just be shaking their head like, what are you thinking? So do you see just like a lot of crazy stuff like that?
Yes. A lot of work on like fuses or circuit breakers where it'll break or something will be wrong. They'll just pull it out, and they won't do it right. So it'll be like broken halfway in, halfway out. And you talk to them and you say, you got to fix that. And the answer is, well, I turned the switch off, so it's fine. It's like, no, there's still a fire hazard there. But yes, electrical can be touchy. Some of the new builds that you're seeing in communities have like the outdoor lamp, right? That's connected and the switch is inside. A lot of the builders, and I probably shouldn't say this out loud, a lot of the builders don't do a great job of burying those lines. So when new homeowners move in, they're doing their landscaping and edging, and they snap that line. So then when you go to flip the switch, it's like, why is the power not work? And the first time it rains, why is our house shorting? Right. So yes, we do see it. I would say that a lot of the older homes, the electrical plumbing are great on them, right? If they're taken care of and every once in a while somebody goes down and wipes off the cobwebs, we see less issues with those than some of the new builds that are coming out.
Can you define old?
Oh man,
20 years, 40 years, 60 years older?
You can definitely see a change in home building and quality, probably early 90 builds and on. And so what you'll see is a lot of times in neighborhoods, they're going so fast that they will miss things, or just like you would do in any business, they're looking for that cheapest option.
Right.
And a lot of times they'll skip corners or cut corners, I should say.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my house was built by the lowest bidder. I'm quite sure of it. In fact, we talked about this electrical stuff. We're in the process of having our bathroom redone, and this company will remain nameless, but they do seem like they've been cutting some corners here and there. So much so that it was supposed to be done by now, but when they went to install the shower, they cut the back piece of like the shower tile part too short. And so at first they were like, that's all right, we'll just put something in the corner. Well, we're like, no, we don't want this extra piece in the corner to shore up your mistake. So they're going to fix it. They've been they're good people to work with, but we had just enough time to look at the stuff that they did while they're waiting to order this new stuff. You talk about duct tape. They put together one of our outlets, and I'm going to have my wife show you a picture of this. It is nothing but duct tape. And it's to the point where we contacted them and said, I'm no electrician, but I don't think that's right. Now, of course, they had the out. Their out was, well, yeah, we're not done. That's just what we did for the short period of time before we bring everything back in and finish up. But he was already done with this part. So I'm quite sure had we not caught that, we'd be living with it until either the house burned down or we renewed our insurance policy and Brian was knocking on the door.
That's exactly right. Yeah. and we would open the outlet up and say, this is not going to work. No, funny bathroom story. I went to a house, a very expensive house, walked into their master bathroom, and I noticed a squeegee on the floor. So I asked the homeowner, why do you keep a squeegee, right? They did a great job of cleaning up the house. Everything was in the perfect spot. And the homeowner sheepishly looked at me and said, well, we had our bathroom redone. And when they put the bathtub in, it's supposed to be on a slight incline.
Oh, no.
And they leveled it. So when the water is in there, they use the squeegee to empty the bathtub.
Because it won't drain, right?
That's exactly right. And again, we're talking probably $1.5 million, $2 million home. And so to fix that would not be significant cost, or if they had caught it when the
right early on,
they could have done it early.
That'd be worth a phone call still. I don't care.
I agree.
Yeah, that's crazy. The last thing that I saw, at least from the crazy stories from realtor.com, somebody said they use spray paint foam to fill in rotting wood around a window. So they had all this rot around the window. So they not only did they use the foam, the spray foam to fill in the rotting wood, but then they cut the foam to look like it was the wood and then painted it and stained it to match. I think that's genius.
I agree. It is genius. And you give them credit for creativity. I would say I don't see a lot of the spray foam, but if we're, go back to duct tape, I think the second item people use is caulking.
Yeah.
I've seen caulking used and you just look at them, there's a 4-inch gap and they've caulked it. And it's like, that's a whole nother piece of wood. Like, what are we doing? But yes, you see caulking all over, whether it be windows or door frames. I've seen it on the ceiling where they didn't do a great job of really connecting the wall to the ceiling. So you had a little bit of a gap, and whoever the contractor was decided that they were going to caulk that, which I can assure you is not an okay thing.
So you mentioned something earlier about being in that bathroom and you saw the squeegee, which kind of made you ask the question. So you're almost like a little bit of a detective when you go in these houses, right? You're looking for just weird stuff that's kind of out of place, and then that kind of jogs your your mind to say, hey, why do you have that? Yeah,
that's actually a really great way to describe it. When you walk into a house, you can pick up pretty quickly how difficult the day is going to be. There are some houses that you walk into and the house is immaculate, right? They know you're coming. So when we go in, we have to set an appointment, but they know you're coming. They've cleaned, they got everything put away. Typically how that'll work is the first thing they say to me is, oh, please disregard how dirty my house is.
Right.
Right. And it's like, there's nothing sitting out. And then there's those houses that you go into and it's like another normal day where the 12 kids ran through and the 5 dogs and everything else and everything sitting out, and they could care less, right? They'll tell you, just go do what you need to do. And they'll sit there and hang out. Typically the ones where the houses are beautiful, they want to walk with you and tell you about all the things that they've done.
Right.
The other ones want you to discover it. And so I have it both ways. I would share with you the ones I like the best are the ones that they let me go and do it on my own. Otherwise, we'll spend 3 hours discussing how this tile was picked over that tile.
Yeah, how you like the caulk on that ceiling.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You know, I did a house out in Buckeye Lake, and it was a beautiful home. It was on the water, and the gentleman walked with me through the entire house and would tell me fun facts in each room about how the contractor had to really work hard to get the materials in because the hallway's narrow.
So does that sometimes, though, when they want to walk with you, do you feel like, okay, what are they hiding here? What are they not wanting me to find?
Not usual. I can usually pick up on if there's something they're not wanting you to see. You know, I see a lot of that in basements. We will walk around and, you know, the sump pump or the water heater and there's some stains on the floor. And so what you'll see is they will quickly move you past that.
And nothing to see here.
Yeah. And again, it's an easy question, right? Like, hey, have you had any water damage, replaced anything? And usually it's nothing big. But if we're pretty quick and defensive, it makes me pause, go take another look. Any
strange rooms with padlocks on that you're curious about?
So I've prior to today, I actually told Scott this one. I went to a well-known
local person.
Yes. And we'll just say that getting into the house was difficult enough. But when I was there, his house was beautiful, walked around, everything looked great. I got into the basement and there was a door that looked like an old pirate door. Right. And so I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like they have a little motif, and I opened the door to see what it was. And you go into a hallway that is done entirely like, you know, think of Pirates of the Caribbean, like the cobblestone floors, the walls are all.
So you're in Hogwarts all of a sudden?
Yes. And so up one flight of stairs, he had a beautiful cigar room with a wine cellar. And then there was another room that he had set up with a bed and a few other things that we won't go into too many details. But as I'm going to leave, I was exiting the property, and the only thing he asked me about was, hey, what'd you think of that basement?
Oh, wow.
And I told him, I said, oh, yeah, it was really cool. And he goes, did you go through the whole thing? Did you see everything? And it was like, this is really awkward. I'm going to leave. So, yes, I've seen some interesting rooms. You see some interesting things sitting out on people's
I was
dressers.
Gonna ask that. Did you run across items where, and it's weirder for me to think that you would get this. I understand when I've talked to people who are police officers and they're walking into a room kind of unannounced or at the very least unexpected. And they're like, oh, okay, good to know that person enjoys that thing. But do you run across items, like personal items that are left out?
Yes.
Wow. All right. No, I'm not going to let that go. You got to tell us what you see.
So here's.
And do you acknowledge it, or do you just look?
No.
You just look away like nothing ever happened.
You just keep moving,
okay.
Bobbing and weaving. So here's what will happen, and I'm married. I think everyone here is married, and so I can relate to this. I will call one of the customers, whoever's on the policy, and we'll set up the inspection. And it never fails. They don't advise their spouse. So I've done a couple properties where I've spoken with the husband. I get there. The husband meets me at the door. We start moving around. And I've walked into the master bedroom, and his spouse is asleep in the bed. And there's been one or two where she was very comfortable in bed.
Oh, wow.
And I've had one wake up and startled.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'm looking at the husband saying, you got to make this right. Because but yes, we definitely see. And then there are times that, you know, there's other things that'll be left out, but yes, don't acknowledge.
Just look away. Keep moving.
Keep moving. Yes.
So the other thing that I was going to ask about, have you ever run across something that was completely out of place, completely unexpected? Like one of the things that I read about, and let me just be honest here. It wasn't like I did 4 hours worth of research. I probably spent 10 minutes online, and there are stories upon stories upon stories. Somebody said that one unexpected find they had is someone living in a tent in a crawl space, unbeknownst to the owner. Like, there's some weird stuff that they find. Have you ever found any really weird, like out of place kind of things?
No.
That makes me feel better, actually.
Yeah, I don't think so. I have definitely run into things that I was not expecting. I was inspecting a house out in Newark, of all places, and I noticed it was a fairly large house, but a little bit outdated. As I'm walking through the house, I go through a door, and there is a full-size basketball court inside the house.
Nice.
And it was, one of those old Hoosiers basketball courts, the wood and paint and everything, and it was great, but you could tell it hadn't been used in a while. I spoke to the homeowner, and she told me that her and her husband had 5 children, and they were very energetic children. And so to keep them busy one summer, he was a contractor. He built them a basketball court inside the house.
That's awesome. Now, I know my wife worked with a guy, I think he lived in New Albany, and he ended up creating an ice rink in his basement because his kids played hockey. And when she would tell me this back when she worked with this guy, I remember thinking, wow, I'm a horrible father because I am not putting an ice rink in the basement. Well, it turns out both of his kids are in the NHL. So I think it panned out.
It worked out well for him.
Yeah, very much. Well, I will say that I'm hoping this spurs some memories. There were just a couple of other items that they talked about, some deal-breaking disasters on the mortgage side where people were like, I'm not buying this house. One of them was a pile of leaves in an attic. I don't know how the hell that happens, but somebody was inspecting it and they found a giant pile of leaves in an attic. That would freak me out a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Scissors embedded in the electric panel. Yeah, I'm not sure how that would happen.
I've seen a bathtub thrown through a wall.
Thrown.
Well, I'm assuming it was thrown, but it was a rehab. Somebody had purchased it, and whoever had lived there before was upset that they were moving out and had pulled the bathtub out, unhooked it, pulled it out, disconnected it from the plumbing, and had thrown it through the bathroom wall.
Oh, wow. That would certainly be something to see. Another one that they said was a downspout that was aimed at an electrical outlet.
That's outstanding.
Bad design.
Yeah.
And then this was the one I thought was pretty interesting because they didn't have a long story with it, but they said they were in a house that was about 10 years old and a new person wanted to buy it. So they were going in there and they were inspecting the home. And when they went up to the attic, they found a bunch of unopened bags full of insulation in the attic. They never put the insulation out 10 years ago. I just thought that was wonderful. I bet you those people were like, man, this house sucks.
Right.
They're
It's
just
so drafty.
they're just cussing the home builder. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. But yeah, I think just having that type of job where you're going out and you're meeting a lot of people, that's got to be pretty rewarding.
I enjoy it. I really do. There's definitely customers, right, that are difficult or rude, and I think you get that in any business. It's more about just kind of how do you respond to it. But there are definitely times where you're out and you're talking to a customer. They clearly have questions. They clearly need some guidance or advice, and they're comfortable enough to ask you. So I think that is rewarding. It's something that I enjoy, and I enjoy talking to them and kind of hearing their life story. Everyone wants to tell you their life story when you're there at their house. That's for sure.
Great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. What have we learned today?
Yeah, I learned that you can fix anything with duct tape if you just really put your mind to it.
See, I already knew that, but yeah,
Right.
That's a good thing to learn. I learned that before you renew your insurance policy, put all the adult stuff away because someone like Brian's going to be walking through your place. I think it's fair to do that going forward. All right. Well, hey, thanks a lot, Brian. We appreciate you stopping by and talking to us. And this is Scott McLaughlin
I'm Chris Kiernan.
saying, we'll see you at work.
Thank you for listening to the Not in the Job Description podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, please let us know by sending us an email with a brief description of your story to stories@notinthejob.com.